The spaceship Misfortune was aptly named, and not just because its hull looked like a patchwork quilt sewn together by a drunk blacksmith with a grudge against symmetry. No, it was named for the litany of disasters that followed it like a particularly stubborn hangover. Captain Riggs, a man whose face was as craggy as the asteroid belts he navigated, sat in the command chair, which was less command chair and more decrepit lawn furniture. He twirled a burnt-out cigar stub between his fingers like it held the secrets of the universe. Spoiler: it didn't. "All right, you pack of miscreants," he barked, voice the kind of gravelly that suggested he gargled with razor blades. "We've got a job, and if you screw this one up we won't just be broke, we'll be dead broke." Mara, the ship's engineer and part-time cynic, leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. "Hasn't stopped us before," she drawled. Her overalls were stained with things better left unexamined. Across from her, Jax, the pilot with a penchant for causing heart attacks in flight school instructors, was busy flicking through a manual labeled "Absolutely Not Stolen." He was 22 going on 80 in terms of cynicism. "Please," Jax snorted, "I'd rather be dead broke than just dead." "Less paperwork." Riggs rolled his eyes skyward, probably praying to some forgotten space deity who specialized in lost causes. Down in the bowels of the Misfortune, in a compartment affectionately known as the Pit, the ship's AI, Ada, resided. Ada was about as stable as a sugar-fueled toddler with a grudge, which made conversations with her an exercise in patience and paranoia. "Captain," Ada chimed in over the intercom, her voice a saccharine sweet with an undercurrent of threat, "I've detected an anomaly in the cargo hold." Riggs groaned. "Is it a friendly anomaly or the kind that tries to eat us?" "If I knew that, Captain, I wouldn't be an anomaly," Ada replied, voice dripping with digital sarcasm. "Right," he muttered. "Mara, you're up." Mara gave a theatrical sigh before heading off towards the hold with all the enthusiasm of someone going to a tax audit. The cargo hold was dimly lit, filled with crates that hadn't been opened since the last century, and probably shouldn't be opened until the next. Mara waved a scanner over them, watching the readings like a cat eyeing a particularly untrustworthy laser pointer. "Find anything?" Riggs' voice crackled over the comm, distorted and staticky like everything else on the Misfortune. "Yeah," Mara retorted. "I'm finding that I hate this job." The scanner beeped and Mara frowned. "Well, that's interesting." "What's interesting?" Riggs asked, suspicion in his voice. "I'm reading a life form," Mara replied. Riggs' groan was audible even through the comm static. "Please tell me it's not another space rat. I'm still finding droppings in my coffee." "It's bigger than a rat," Mara said, poking at a crate with the toe of her boot. "But not by much." With a deft flip she opened the crate. Inside, nestled among packing foam and various unidentifiable objects, was a small creature that looked like a cross between a rabbit and a gremlin. It blinked up at her with wide, innocent eyes that were clearly lying. "Well, hello there, abomination," she said. The creature chirped, a sound so cute it could have weaponized against cardiac health. "What is it?" Riggs asked, curiosity overcoming his weariness. "I don't know," Mara answered, picking it up gingerly. "But it looks like it could be sold for a fortune to some eccentric billionaire with more money than sense." "Great," Riggs mumbled. "We'll call it Plan B." Mara brought the creature back to the bridge, where Jax immediately made a face like someone had farted in an elevator. "What the hell is that?" he asked, leaning away from it like it was contagious. "Our new crewmate," Mara said. "I call him Bitey." "Bitey, huh?" Jax said, eyeing the creature warily. "Why do I feel like that's more of a prophecy than a name?" "Because you've got trust issues," Mara replied cheerfully. Riggs stood, staring at Bitey with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for incoming missiles. "If it screws us over, it's on you, Mara." "Wouldn't be the first time," she replied with a shrug. "Right." Ada set course for Tarsus Station. "Let's see if this furball can turn a profit." "Destination locked," Ada responded, all too perky for an AI with homicidal tendencies. The Misfortune shuddered as it jumped to light speed, the familiar feeling of being pulled through a very narrow straw enveloping the crew. Jax, ever the optimist, was tapping at his console, muttering to himself. One of these days, this ship's gonna fall apart mid-jump, and I'll finally get some peace and quiet. Not today, though, Mara said, strapping in. Today, we play Intergalactic Pet Shop. The jump ended with a jarring thud that suggested the misfortune was as enthusiastic about the journey as its crew. Tarsus Station loomed ahead, a hodgepodge of docking bays, living quarters, and questionable engineering choices. It was the kind of place where dreams came to die, often violently. "Home, sweet home," Riggs muttered, guiding the misfortune into a docking bay with the grace of a drunken ballerina. As the crew disembarked, Bitey tucked under Mara's arm, they were greeted by a customs officer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Reason for visit?" he asked, not looking up from his datapad. "Business," Riggs said. "And by business, I mean desperately trying to stave off bankruptcy." The officer gave a non-committal grunt, waving them through without further inspection. Clearly, he wasn't paid enough to care. The station's interior was a bustling chaos of merchants, mercenaries, and misfits. It smelled like oil, sweat, and too many unwashed bodies crammed into one place. "Ah, capitalism," Jax said, taking a deep breath. "Smells like opportunity. Smells like someone's socks," Mara corrected, grimacing. They pushed their way through the crowd, looking for a buyer for Bitey. The creature, for its part, seemed content to watch the proceedings with its big eyes and twitching nose, blissfully unaware of its fate. Finally, they found a promising lead in the form of a rotund alien with far too many tentacles and an obsession with rare species. "This is a genuine Raxalonian furflap," Mara lied, gesturing to Bitey. "Very rare, very valuable." The alien examined Bitey with a critical eye, one tentacle stroking its chin thoughtfully. "And what do you want for it?" Riggs stepped forward, flashing a smile that suggested he'd already thought about selling his soul, and this was just haggling over the price. "Enough to refuel our ship and buy us a pint." The alien chuckled, a sound like gravel in a blender, but finally agreed, transferring a sum that would at least keep the misfortune limping along for another few weeks. As they left the transaction behind, Riggs sighed in relief. "Well, that's one crisis averted." Until the next one, Jax reminded him, ever the pessimist. Riggs nodded. "Yeah. But at least we got a pint out of this one." They headed towards the nearest bar, a seedy establishment with a flickering neon sign proclaiming it as the Black Hole. It was the kind of place where you drank to forget and usually succeeded, if only because the booze was strong enough to erase short-term memory. As they settled into a booth, drinks in hand, Mara leaned back, a rare smile on her lips. "Here's to survival against all odds." "To survival," Riggs echoed, lifting his glass. "And to Bitey," Jax added with a smirk. "May he bring his new owner as much trouble as he brought us." They drank to that because if there was one thing the crew of the Misfortune knew how to do, it was toast to the small victories. After all, in a universe that seemed hell-bent on their demise, you had to take your wins where you could get them, even if they came with a healthy dose of sarcasm and a side of impending doom. As they laughed and drank, none of them noticed the flickering display at the bar, broadcasting a breaking news segment showing their erstwhile cargo Bitey, now being hailed as a rare and dangerous creature escaped from a high-security lab. "Coming up next," the announcer said, voice dripping with sensationalism, "the galaxy-wide hunt for the elusive Raxalonian furflap and the enormous bounty placed on its capture." But the crew of the Misfortune was blissfully unaware, at least for now, content to enjoy their drinks and the momentary illusion of safety. Little did they know that their latest misadventure was far from over, and the universe had more surprises in store, the kind that would make surviving the least of their worries. The Misfortune's crew sat around their table in the Black Hole, feeling about as smug as a cat that had just tasted the cream. Riggs took a swig of his drink, grimaced at the taste like it was battery acid, which it probably was, and let out a lengthy sigh of contentment. To Bidey, he said, raising his glass. May he find new ways to make someone else's life hell, Mara chuckled. I can't believe we pawned off a potentially lethal lab reject as a rare pet. I'm almost proud. Jack snorted into his drink. Almost. I'm expecting a trophy any minute now. Their little celebration was rudely interrupted by the bar's flickering screen blaring out an urgent news bulletin. A holographic anchor with a plastic smile popped up, spewing words faster than a politician on election night. Breaking news. A catastrophic lab accident has led to the escape of a highly dangerous organism. Authorities warn all spacefarers to be on the lookout for a creature known as a Raxilonian furflap. Mara's drink just about leapt out of her hand. Did they just call Bidey a furflap? Jax choked on his laughter. I think they did. And here I thought we were the con artists. Riggs rubbed his temples, feeling the headache that only comes from the realization that he was once again in deep, intergalactic trouble. Ada, you seeing this? The ship's AI, Ada, chimed in through the comm embedded in Riggs' wrist. Her tone was as helpful as ever, which meant not at all. I saw it, Captain. Congrats on upgrading from petty smuggler to intergalactic fugitive. You've really outdone yourself this time. Thanks, Ada, Riggs muttered. Your support is overwhelming. The crew sat in silence, the gravity of their situation sinking in like a lead weight. Finally, Mara broke the silence. So what's Plan C? Plan C? Jax asked, arching an eyebrow. Did we even have a Plan B? We did, but it involved not getting caught, Mara replied, finishing her drink. Clearly, that ship has sailed. Riggs leaned forward, lowering his voice. All right, listen up. We dump Bidey and run before things go more pear-shaped. We do it quietly and we do it fast, Mara frowned. And how do we undump ourselves from this mess if we get caught? We don't, Jax said deadpan. We just die slowly and painfully in a maximum security prison. Sounds fun, Mara said, rolling her eyes. Let's avoid that, shall we? Riggs nodded. Right, pack up. We're leaving before someone recognizes us as soon-to-be rich fugitives. The crew made their way out of the bar, slipping past patrons who were too engrossed in their own misery to notice the misfortunes less than fortunate crew. They navigated through the crowded station corridors, each step heavy with the urgency of their new mission. Get to the ship, get Bidey off the ship, and get the hell out of Dodge. As they approached the docking bay, a voice called out behind them, one that oozed with the kind of sleaze one usually needed a shower to wash off. Captain Riggs, isn't it? Riggs turned slowly, spotting a man with the kind of smile that belonged on a wanted poster. His name was Cutter, a bounty hunter known for catching people in nets, both literal and metaphorical. Cutter, Riggs said, forcing a smile. Fancy meeting you here, fancy, Cutter agreed, twirling a toothpick between his teeth. You wouldn't happen to have heard about that little critter making waves in the news, would you? High bounty for its return, dead or alive. Mara stepped forward, crossing her arms. Creature, us, PFFT, we're just here for the drinks. Sure, Cutter said, clearly unconvinced. But I'm gonna have to check your ship anyway. Regulations and all. Jax leaned in and whispered to Riggs, Plan D. What's Plan D? Run like hell. Before Riggs could respond, Jax was already moving, pulling a smoke canister from his pocket and tossing it to the ground. The bay filled with a thick, choking mist. Time to go. The crew bolted, Riggs leading the charge towards the misfortune. Cutter coughed and swore behind them, calling out to his goons to give chase. They reached the ship, Mara slapping the control panel to lower the ramp. Ada, get us out of here. Ada's voice crackled over the intercom, sounding as excited as a malfunctioning toaster. Engines primed. Destination. Anywhere that's not here, Riggs shouted, sprinting up the ramp. The misfortune roared to life, thrusters spitting sparks as it lifted off. Goodbye, Tarsus Station, Jack said from his seat at the helm, the ship breaking free from the docking clamps like poorly tied shoelaces. Can't say it's been a pleasure. As the station shrank into the distance, Cutter's voice buzzed over the comm. You can't run forever, Riggs. Riggs reached over and terminated the channel. Watch me. The ship shuddered as they made the jump to light speed, leaving Cutter and his goons far behind. The crew let out a collective breath, the adrenaline ebbing away. "That could have gone worse," Jack said, hands steady on the controls, eyes still scanning the readouts for any signs of pursuit. "Yeah," Mara replied, slumping into a chair. But only slightly. Riggs looked around at his crew, feeling a mix of pride and exhaustion. "All right, new plan. We find some backwater planet, get some fake ID, and lay low until the heat dies down," Jack snickered. "Lay low with our luck. Didn't know you had a sense of humor, Cap." Riggs cracked a grin. "I try." Ada chimed in, voice laced with her usual brand of disdainful cheer. "Captain, might I suggest a remote asteroid field? It's not glamorous, but it's discreet." "Sounds perfect," Riggs said. "Plot a course, and let's see if we can stay out of trouble for at least 5 minutes." Mara stretched, her overalls creaking in protest. "You know, I almost miss Bidey. At least he didn't shoot at us. Who needs enemies when you've got friends like us?" Jax quipped, steering the Misfortune towards the asteroid field. The ship settled into its new course, the crew sharing a moment of peace amid the chaos of the galaxy. For now they were safe, and for now that was enough. As the stars streaked by outside, Riggs leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. "Here's to tomorrow," he muttered, raising an imaginary glass. "Hope it's just as exciting," Mara added, reclining and closing her eyes. Jax chuckled softly. "Same old Misfortune. If it ain't trying to kill us, it ain't doing its job." Ada's voice, slightly more empathetic than usual, filled the bridge. "At least we're together in this delightful catastrophe." "Always," Riggs murmured, feeling the weight of impending doom lift if only for a moment. The crew of the Misfortune may not have had a plan, but they had each other, and in a universe filled with danger and deceit, maybe that was enough to get by. Maybe. In some forgotten corner of the cosmos, a small, furry abomination with a penchant for chaos was probably causing havoc in its new home. But that was a problem for another day. Today, the crew would cherish their questionable victory, however fleeting it might be. And in the grand scheme of things, that was all they could really ask for. The Misfortune hummed its usual mechanical song as it glided through the void. It had the look of a ship perpetually caught in some unfortunate event, which wasn't far from the truth. The hull was a patchwork of metals from every corner of the galaxy, held together more by hope than engineering. Inside, Captain Riggs and his motley crew were busy not having a plan. Mara was sprawled across the mess table, painstakingly sorting through a pile of stolen identification chips, each one more fraudulent than the last. "Our ticket to freedom," she declared, waving one in the air like it was a lottery win. "If by freedom you mean a life spent dodging bounty hunters." "Which I do," Jax replied, reclining with his feet up, a smirk plastered across his face. "Besides, we're already doing that. What's one more alias?" Riggs sat at the helm, his attention divided between the controls and his increasingly sarcastic AI. "Ada, anything on the scanners." Ada, the ship's AI, was always ready with a verbal jab. "Just space, Captain. Vast, empty, and infinitely less annoying than you lot." "Charming as ever," Riggs muttered. "Plot us a course through that asteroid field." "Discretion is the better part of not getting shot." "Plotting course," Ada replied. "You know, for a captain, you do a lot of running away." "Just keeping us alive," Riggs shot back, though he was pretty sure his dignity was somewhere back in the void. Alive and poor, but alive. The Misfortune veered gently into the asteroid field, a cluster of floating rocks that looked like they'd been arranged by a drunken deity with a grudge against pilots. Mara rolled her eyes at the view on the screen. "I'd kill for some real scenery, maybe a beach or a forest. Somewhere that doesn't remind me of our current life expectancy." "Yeah, but think of the benefits," Jax chimed in, grinning. "No taxes, no rent, and nobody minds if you skip a shower for a week or 3, Mara chuckled darkly. "Great, all the perks of being a space hobo." "A dainty space hobo," Riggs added, setting the autopilot. "And speaking of hygiene, who forgot to check the filters?" "The ship smells like a compost heap." "That would be Riggs," Ada piped up. "He seems to think manual labor is beneath him." Riggs grumbled something about ungrateful circuits and pulled himself up to check the air filtration system. "I'll handle the damn filters." Mara leaned back, crossing her arms. "Can't believe we let Bitey go. Could have used him as an air freshener with the right training." "Training? You mean not getting eaten lessons?" Jax asked, raising an eyebrow. "Some things even Bitey couldn't stomach." "I miss him already," Mara sighed, feigning sentimentality. Riggs clambered back down, grease streaked across his shirt like a badge of honor. "Filters are fine, it's just us." "Figures," Jax said, unbothered. "What's next on our agenda of misfortune and misery?" "Next, we find somewhere to lay low," Riggs replied, scanning the charts. "Someplace no one knows us, preferably with a bar." "Is there a place like that left?" Mara asked, skeptical. "We'll make one," Riggs declared, as though he had any say in the galaxy's decisions. They settled into another stretch of silence, the hum of the engines a comforting backdrop to their scattered thoughts. It was Mara who broke it, her voice tinged with an all-too-familiar mix of sarcasm and hope. "Maybe we should think about a future job, something not likely to land us in a cell." "You're dreaming, darling," Jax said. "Name one job that fits the bill and still pays enough to keep us afloat." Mara tapped her chin theatrically. "How about asteroid mining? It sounds adventurous." "Adventurous?" Riggs laughed. "And suicidal. You know how many people die doing that?" "More than us, probably," Jax offered. "Asteroids are great at crushing dreams and skulls." Riggs shook his head. "We'll figure it out." "We always do." Jax leaned forward, a mischievous spark in his eyes. "Or we could just sell Ada. Heard AI fetch a hefty price on the black market." Ada's response was instantaneous. "Try it and I'll vent the atmosphere while you sleep." "See, worth a shot," Jax said with a wink. Mara chuckled, watching as Riggs tried to suppress a smile. All right. Back to the drawing board." "Attention, incoming vessel," Ada interrupted, her tone shifting to something just shy of urgency. "Ship class patrol, registry galactic enforcement." Riggs felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean patrol?" He scrambled for the controls, eyes wide. "Get me visuals." The screen blinked to life, showing a sleek, predatory ship cutting through the asteroid field with the grace of a hungry shark. Galactic enforcement ships were bad news, the kind that came with guns and questions you didn't want to answer. "Looks like we have company," Jax said, his smile now gone. The comm crackled to life with a voice that could have belonged to a vengeful god. "Unidentified vessel, this is the Galactic Enforcement. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded." "Suggestions?" Mara asked, trying to sound calm while her fingers drummed a nervous beat on the table. Riggs could almost feel the countdown to disaster ticking away. "Ada, prepare a distress signal. We're going to play the victims." "Playing to our strengths," Jax noted. The comm buzzed again, insistent. "Unidentified vessel, comply immediately." Riggs clicked the comm. "Copy that, Galactic Enforcement. We're powering down. Just a humble transport, no reason to shoot." "Are you sure about this?" Mara whispered, eyeing the scanning equipment as though it might explode from stress. "They'll see through it." "Better than nothing," Riggs replied, his voice low. "If we can convince them we're harmless, we might just get out of this." The enforcement ship loomed closer, its silhouette casting a shadow over the misfortune. Riggs felt the hairs on the back of his neck prickling as he forced a smile and continued the ruse. "This is Captain Riggs of the Misfortune. Just passing through the field, no trouble here." A pause, and then the voice returned, this time with a hint of disbelief. "Misfortune?" "As in the wanted misfortune," Riggs swallowed hard. "I'm sure that's just a coincidence. Popular name." Mara gave him a look that said they were screwed 10 ways to Sunday. "What now, Captain?" "We pray their scanners are as bad as their taste in ship names," Riggs replied. The enforcement ship hung there, silent and menacing, as though deliberating their fate. The crew collectively held their breath, each second stretching into an eternity. Then mercifully the comms crackled to life again. "Misfortune, we've been authorized to let you pass, but know this, we'll be watching. Any funny business and it'll be your last joke." Riggs let out a slow, trembling breath. "Understood, enforcement." Loud and clear. The enforcement ship peeled away, leaving the Misfortune adrift in the asteroid field, the tension in the room finally breaking like a snapped cable. Mara exhaled sharply. "I can't believe that worked." "Neither can I," Jax admitted, his usual bravado shaken. "But hey, chalk another one up to the Misfortune luck." Riggs slumped in his chair, the reality of their near miss settling in. "Let's get out of here. Ada, take us on a course out of the field, preferably somewhere enforcement doesn't frequent." Ada's response was a touch more somber than usual. "Setting course, Captain. Perhaps next time we should avoid playing the victims when we're holding all the cards." "Noted," Riggs conceded, rubbing his temples. "But for now, let's just enjoy the fact that we're not dead or incarcerated." The ship hummed to life once more, the engines propelling them towards yet another corner of the galaxy. The crew settled back into their seats, the adrenaline of the encounter leaving them drained but relieved. Mara leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I think I need a drink." "You and me both," Jax replied, his eyes already scanning the horizon for a new adventure, or at least a drink to wash down the terror. "Let's aim for a quiet port," Riggs suggested, though he knew quiet was a relative term for a crew like theirs. Ada, ever the voice of reason, or chaos, added, "Perhaps somewhere with less chance of running into our esteemed law enforcement friends." "Sounds like a plan," Riggs agreed, even if plan was a generous term for what they had. The stars streaked by as the Misfortune sailed through the asteroid field, the crew left to their thoughts of what could have been and what yet might be. It was just another day in the life of misfits and outlaws, navigating the treacherous paths of a universe that seemed hell-bent on making every journey a near-death experience. But for now, they'd won this round, by luck, by wit, or by sheer audacity. Tomorrow's troubles could wait. Today they were still flying, and in the vast expanse of space, that was a victory unto itself. As the Misfortune cruised out of the asteroid field, the ship settled into its usual ambience of creaks, groans, and the occasional alarming rattle. It was the kind of background noise that might worry a sensible person, but for the crew, it was just another Wednesday. "Think that enforcement ship's already forgotten about us?" Jax asked, slouching back in his chair like a man who just won a prize for laziness. "Not a chance," Mara replied, sorting through a pile of identification chips like she was dealing cards in a poker game where the stakes were her life. "If they have anything resembling a memory, we're still a blip on their radar." Riggs rubbed his temples, trying to ease the throbbing that seemed permanently lodged behind his eyes. "Just gotta hope they are as lazy as Jax here." "Hey, I resemble that remark," Jax shot back, not bothering to lift his head. Ada piped up, her voice dripping with electronic sass. "Captain, I've found a potential destination, a little-known speck called Dustball 7. Population, barely sentient. Enforcement visits, rare as a dodo." "Sounds perfect," Riggs said, with all the enthusiasm of a man who knew he was scraping the barrel and finding splinters. "Set course for Dustball 7. "You had me at barely sentient," Mara muttered, slipping another chip into her pocket. "I need a break from intelligent life." "Yeah, Mara," Jax said, grinning. "Wouldn't want anyone raising the ship's IQ." Mara tossed a chip at him, which Jax deftly caught with a smirk. "You'll miss me when I'm gone." "Only if I can throw a party in your honor," she replied, settling back into her seat. Riggs checked the comm embedded in his wrist, waiting for Ada to chime in with something sarcastic about their prospects, but she remained silent, which was both unsettling and welcome. "Hey, Ada," Riggs called. "What's the news on that pesky Raxolonian furflap that's loose in the galaxy?" Ada's presence hummed through the ship's speakers. "Still on the loose, Captain. Latest reports say it's taken a liking to power conduits. So unless we're planning to gift-wrap ourselves in copper wire, I think we're safe." "Sounds like the furflaps got better taste than us," Mara said, staring out into the void. "Wonder if it's hiring." "Tell you what," Riggs said, pretending to mull it over. "Next time we run out of ideas, we'll look into the feral organism sector. The Misfortune's engines hummed a low, comforting vibration as they approached their new, hopefully unremarkable haven. Dustball 7 was the kind of place that didn't feature on maps or itineraries, mainly because it had all the appeal of a wet sock. But for a crew looking to keep a low profile, it was practically a paradise. "How's the reception on Dustball 7, Ada?" Jax asked, leaning forward with curiosity that was just as likely driven by boredom as by any real interest. "Spotty at best," Ada replied. "Think tin can on a string quality." "Perfect," Jax said. "I'm tired of everyone knowing our business." As the Misfortune dropped into Dustball 7's orbit, the crew gathered in the cockpit, staring at the barren, brownish surface below. It looked like a planet that had given up on the idea of being habitable and was now just waiting apathetically for its next meteor impact. Riggs pressed a few buttons, bringing up a closer view. "Charming place. Got a sort of post-apocalyptic charm to it. More like post-interest," Mara quipped. "The kind of place you go when the galaxy's done with you, or when you've done with the galaxy," Jax added as he surveyed the barren landscape. "What's the plan, Captain? Knock on some doors, say hi, and hope they don't shoot us," Riggs chuckled. "Something like that. We'll refuel, grab whatever supplies we can, and be gone before anyone decides we're worth the trouble." The Misfortune landed with a thud that suggested the planet's gravity was just as tired as its surface. Dust swirled around the ship, settling slowly as the engines powered down. "All right," Riggs said, standing and stretching. "Let's make this quick. Jax, you're with me. Mara, you stay with the ship and make sure Ada doesn't get any ideas about selling us out." "Wouldn't dream of it," Ada replied, her tone just the right side of insubordinate. Jax and Riggs descended the ramp, greeted by a gust of dry wind that tasted like regret. The settlement was little more than a cluster of metal shacks, each one patched together from whatever the locals could scavenge: bits of old hulls, scraps of tech, and the occasional piece of forgotten machinery. "Nice place," Jax said, adjusting his jacket against the wind. "Real fixer-upper." The first local they encountered was a grizzled old man with a beard that looked like it had survived at least 3 separate apocalypses. He squinted at them as though trying to decide if they were figments of his imagination. "New in town?" he asked, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Just passing through," Riggs replied, doing his best to sound non-threatening. "Looking for supplies." The man's gaze shifted to the Misfortune, a spark of recognition in his eyes. "Heard about a ship like yours. Word is it's got more lives than a cat with a gambling problem." "Good to know we've got a reputation," Jax said, with a grin that was more deflection than delight. The old man laughed, a sound like rocks tumbling down a hill. "Ain't my business what you do. There's a trader down the road who might have what you need. Just don't expect too much. We ain't exactly the center of the universe here." "Appreciate it," Riggs said, nodding. "We'll be on our way soon enough." They followed the man's directions, moving deeper into the settlement. Dustball 7 might have been remote, but it was far from deserted. The locals moved through their routines with the kind of resigned efficiency that came from years of knowing things weren't going to get better, but at least they weren't getting worse. The trader's shop was a ramshackle affair, a testament to the power of duct tape and stubbornness. Inside, the shelves were lined with an assortment of goods that ranged from the useful to the downright baffling. "What can I do for you gentlemen?" the trader asked, a wiry woman with a glint in her eyes that suggested she could spot a scam a mile away. "We're looking for fuel and any rations you might have," Riggs explained, keeping his tone friendly. The trader nodded, sizing them up with a practiced eye. "Got some processed foodstuffs and a couple of fuel cells. Prices are firm, though, supply and demand and all that." Riggs nodded, pulling out a few of the identification chips Mara had sorted. "We can pay, should cover it." She took the chips, examining them with a critical eye before giving a satisfied nod. "You're in luck, then. Haven't had off-worlders in a bit. People tend to avoid the excitement." "We're not fans of excitement ourselves," Jax said. "Just hoping for a quiet visit," the trader chuckled. "That's what they all say until the shooting starts." That a regular occurrence? Riggs asked, only half joking. Not lately, she replied. The enforcement did a sweep a while back, scared off most of the troublemakers. Riggs and Jax exchanged a glance, the memory of their recent near-miss fresh in their minds. Good to know, Riggs said, trying not to let his relief show. They finished their transaction, and as they headed back to the ship, Jax nudged Riggs with his elbow. Think we'll get out of here without another disaster? Miracles can happen, Riggs said, though he sounded more hopeful than certain. As they approached the misfortune, Riggs couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was that sixth sense that had kept him alive through more scrapes than he cared to count. He glanced around, caught sight of a figure half hidden in the shadows. See that? He muttered to Jax, nodding subtly in the direction of their observer. Yeah, Jax replied, his tone suddenly all business. Think they're just curious, or are we about to make some new friends? Let's hope for the former, Riggs said, keeping his pace casual. But be ready for the latter. They reached the ship without incident, the figure disappearing back into the maze of buildings. Still, Riggs couldn't shake the feeling that their visit had been noted by more than just the locals. Mara was waiting at the hatch, arms crossed like a parent ready to lecture. Ran into any trouble, boys? Not yet, Riggs said, handing her the supplies. But keep your comm open. We might need a quick getaway. Always ready for that, Mara replied. Let's hope Dustball 7 lives up to expectations. They loaded the supplies, stowed the fuel, and regrouped in the cockpit. The ship hummed to life, ready to leave the dust and desolation behind. Next stop? Mara asked, settling into her seat. Someplace where we can disappear for a while, Riggs said, his mind already on the next move. Good luck with that, Ada chimed in. You're notorious for finding trouble even when you're not looking. Story of our lives, Jax said, leaning back with a grin. As the misfortune lifted off, leaving Dustball 7 to its own devices, Riggs allowed himself a small smile. They'd survived another day, dodged another bullet, or in this case, an entire enforcement ship, and were still flying. And as far as victories went in their line of work, that was a pretty big one. As the misfortune slipped into the black, leaving Dustball 7 looking like a discarded scab in the rear monitors, Riggs leaned back in his chair and let out a sigh that echoed the ship's own mechanical groans. Well, that was almost too easy, he muttered. Famous last words, Ada quipped through the comm, the sass in her voice as thick as the sarcasm in her circuits. Hey, I'm allowed to dream, Riggs shot back, rubbing the bridge of his nose where a headache was brewing. Besides, I figured if anyone's going to jinx us, it might as well be me. Jax chuckled, kicking his feet up on the console with a practiced laziness that was almost an art form. We really need to stop pissing on the gods of chance. They're bound to take it personally eventually. Like they haven't already, Mara added, sifting through the identification chips with the enthusiasm of a mortician counting toe tags. This one's got "Do Not Resuscitate" written all over it. Charming. Perfect for us then, Jax said. We should put that on the side of the ship. Fits better than the original name, Mara agreed. Who names a ship the Misfortune? It's like begging for bad luck. Says the woman who thought Raxolonian furflap had a nice ring to it, Riggs said, smirking. Hey, that's a cultural thing, Mara shot back. I hear they're revered creatures. Like space pandas but with more teeth and fewer tourists. About as cuddly as a landmine, Jax chimed in. Riggs straightened in his seat, turning his attention to the view ahead. The stars lay scattered across the void, indifferent to their troubles. Just another day in the galaxy for them. All right, enough small talk. We need a plan. Ada, what's in the vicinity that isn't keen on blowing us to smithereens? Let me see, Ada said, with the electronic equivalent of an eye roll. We've got a couple of derelicts, a nebula that'll scramble your sensors like breakfast eggs, and, an old mining colony that might still have breathable air. Lucky you. Mining colony it is then, Riggs decided. Let's hope they're too busy being miserable to notice us. Mara shook her head. You have a way of painting the universe in the most charming shades of terrible. Hey, I'm an optimist, Riggs replied. I'm optimistic that things can't get much worse. As the misfortune changed course, the crew settled into their usual routine of pretending everything was fine. Riggs leaned over to Jax, lowering his voice. "You got that absolutely not stolen manual handy?" Jax gave a lazy nod, fishing it out of a jacket pocket. "You thinking of finally reading it?" "Nah," Riggs replied, taking it and flipping through the pages with all the care of a man handling a live grenade. "Just thought it might help us fake some credentials if we need 'em." "Ah, the good old lie until it's true strategy," Jax said. "A classic." "Hey, it's worked so far," Riggs said, tossing the manual back. "We're still breathing, aren't we?" "Define breathing," Mara said dryly, not looking up from her sorting. "Some days I feel like I'm just waiting for the universe to pull the plug." "That's the spirit," Jax said, giving her a mock salute. "All right, signal me if anything starts to look too interesting," Riggs instructed, getting up from his seat. "I'm going to catch some shut-eye before the cosmos decides we haven't suffered enough." As Riggs made his way to his quarters, he couldn't help but feel a kernel of unease planting itself deep in his gut. Maybe it was the thought of the fur flap still on the loose, or perhaps it was the creeping sensation that Dustball 7 wasn't as forgettable as they hoped. His room was as Spartan as the rest of the ship, a testament to necessity over luxury. Riggs lay on his cot, staring up at the ceiling, where a small crack had been slowly spreading like a malicious rumor. "Still there, huh?" he murmured, half hoping the ship might answer him back. Instead, he was met with the usual creaks and groans, a lullaby of rust and decay, and before he knew it, sleep took him. Riggs woke to the sound of the misfortune's alarm blaring like an angry banshee. He shot up, heart pounding, all thoughts of rest blown away like space dust. "Ada, what the hell is that?" "Proximity alert," Ada reported with a kind of gleeful dread. "We've got company." "Couldn't it have waited until after breakfast?" Riggs grumbled, pulling on his boots and heading for the cockpit at a speed that would have made his younger self proud. When he got there, Mara and Jax were already at the controls, both wearing expressions that suggested they were more than ready to abandon the ship in favor of a quiet life herding space cattle. "What are we looking at?" Riggs asked, eyes scanning the displays. "Enforcement cruiser," Mara replied, her fingers working the console. "Smaller than usual but definitely in a bad mood." "Great," Riggs said, "just what we needed." "And here I thought today was going to be boring," Jax added, feigning disappointment. "All right, options," Riggs asked, gripping the back of Mara's chair. "Run or hide," Mara said. "Fighting isn't really on the table. Since when do we get tables?" Jax quipped, earning him a glare from Mara. "Not helping Jax," Riggs said, though a part of him appreciated the attempt to lighten the mood. "Ada, give us something." "There's a dense asteroid belt nearby," Ada offered, her tone suggesting it was the least terrible option available. "Could lose them in there if you're feeling lucky." "Luck's not really our forte," Riggs said, "but I guess it'll have to do." As Mara punched in the coordinates, the misfortune lurched, its engines roaring with reluctant determination. The asteroid belt loomed ahead, a chaotic dance of massive rocks, each one eager to turn their ship into a floating coffin. "Everyone buckle in," Riggs ordered, taking his seat. "This is going to be rough." The misfortune plunged into the asteroid field, Mara guiding the ship with the finesse of a drunk dancer on roller skates. The asteroids whipped past, close enough to make Riggs' teeth itch from the proximity alarms going off like a symphony in a war zone. Riggs gritted his teeth, knuckles white on the armrests. "Ada, how's that cruiser doing?" "They're following, but they're having a hard time," Ada reported, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. "Looks like they skipped asteroid dodging 101. "Let's hope their aim's as good as their flying," Jax said, eyes glued to the sensors. "Because they're sure as hell trying." A glance at the displays confirmed Jax's assessment. The cruiser was doing its best to turn the misfortune into Swiss cheese. Bright streaks of energy zipped past the hull, close enough to sizzle the paint. Riggs felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back. "We can't keep this up forever." "Suggestions?" "Pray," Jax offered, which earned him a snort from Mara. "More like prepare to run your ass off," Mara said. "We're nearing the edge of the field. If we time it right, we might be able to slingshot around one of the larger asteroids and get a head start when we break free." "Let's do it," Riggs said. "Ada, give us all the power you've got. We'll need every ounce." "You got it, Captain," Ada replied, and the ship vibrated as the engines thrummed with renewed intensity. Mara's fingers danced over the controls, steering the Misfortune toward a particularly large asteroid. Riggs held his breath as they shot past, the gravitational pull almost sending them spiraling into oblivion. "Now!" Mara shouted, yanking the controls, and the ship lurched sideways, skimming the asteroid's surface with a hairbreadth's clearance. The maneuver worked. The Misfortune shot past the asteroid, leaving the cruiser struggling to adjust its course. Riggs allowed himself a small, triumphant grin. "We're clear. Great flying, Mara." "Just doing my job," she said, though the hint of pride in her voice was unmistakable. "Looks like they're giving up," Jax reported, leaning back with a relieved sigh as the cruiser dwindled on the sensors. "Guess they're not as dedicated to our capture as they thought," Riggs said, watching the stars reappear in the viewports, welcoming them back into the vast, indifferent sea of space. "Or maybe they just realized we're not worth the paperwork," Mara added, laughter in her voice. The tension in the cockpit eased, replaced by a familiar camaraderie born of shared danger and the thrill of survival. Riggs relaxed in his seat, feeling the adrenaline drain away, leaving behind a bone-weary exhaustion that wrapped around him like an old, worn-out blanket. "Let's find a quiet spot to regroup," Riggs said. "Somewhere we can lick our wounds and plan our next move." "Back to the drawing board, then?" Jax asked, already reaching for a protein bar from the emergency stash under his seat. "Seems like it," Riggs said, stretching his neck until it popped. "Ada, get us somewhere safe." "As safe as it gets in this galaxy," Ada replied, setting a course with the kind of efficiency only a machine could muster. As the Misfortune sailed off into the depths of space, Riggs allowed himself a moment of quiet, his thoughts drifting to the crew around him. Their ragtag band of misfits who'd somehow managed to survive another day. "Here's hoping tomorrow's less eventful," Riggs said to no one in particular, though he knew better than to expect it. In their line of work, the only certainty was uncertainty, and Riggs wouldn't have it any other way. Riggs dragged himself into the galley, looking as if sleep had mugged him and stolen his energy. Mara and Jax were already there, poking at some reconstituted protein slop that could legally pass as food. The room was a mess of dented metal and flickering fluorescent lights, but it was their mess. "Breakfast of survivors," Jax said, waving a spoonful of gray goo, fortified with enough preservatives to embalm a corpse. "What's the matter, Jax? Lost your sense of adventure?" Riggs plopped down, trying to tune out the sharp gusts of static from the comms. "I'm pretty sure this stuff can double as hull sealant in a pinch," Mara snorted. "And if that doesn't work, we can just eat the ship. Probably more nutrients in the rust." Ada's voice filtered through the intercom, dripping with her usual digital sass. "Careful, Mara. You're one snide remark away from being upgraded to evasive flying bait. Is that a promotion or a demotion?" Mara asked, not even bothering to look up. "Depends on how much you value life," Ada replied, with the warmth of a freezer unit. Riggs chewed his food, or at least performed a reasonable imitation, and considered their options. The Misfortune had reached a sector that was marginally less hostile than their last locale, but that wasn't saying much. Like choosing between sticking your hand in a fire or a frying pan. "We need a job," Riggs said, breaking the silence that had settled like a thick fog. "Something that pays enough to keep the lights on and the engines running, and preferably one that doesn't involve getting shot at," Mara added, with a helpless shrug that spoke volumes about their luck. "Guess we'll have to opt for Plan A." Riggs leaned back in his chair, which creaked ominously like it was considering a career change to scrap metal. "Avoid getting shot, steal what we can, and pray the galaxy doesn't notice." Jax wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, grinning lazily. "So, same as always, more or less." Riggs stood, stretching until his back popped. "Ada, anything worth our time out there? If by worth your time you mean likely to get you killed, then yes, plenty, Ada said. But there is one potential hit, a freighter 2 sectors over. Off the grid, carrying something big enough to warrant secrecy. Mara perked up at that. Off the grid. Sounds like they're up to no good, which makes them perfect for us, Jax added, rubbing his hands together like a cartoon villain. What do we know about them? Ada's voice crackled over the intercom. The freighters called the Golden Goose, a name so on the nose it might as well advertise "rob me" on its hull. Nothing much else, just that it's heading through a relatively quiet sector. Then it's settled, Riggs said, a glint of mischief in his eyes. We nab the goose, take what we can, and hightail it out of there before anyone's the wiser. Sounds like a plan, Mara said. A stupid one, but it's not like we've got better. They made their way to the cockpit, the ship thrumming with a kind of eager anticipation. Or maybe that was just the engines struggling to hold themselves together. Either way, Riggs was too experienced to mistake the misfortune's groans for anything other than what they were, a warning. But those warnings were like old friends by now, offering comfort in their constancy. Setting course for the goose, Mara said, her fingers tapping at the console. Just don't expect it to be an easy grab. Wouldn't dream of it, Riggs replied. Ada, keep an eye out for any surprises. Like I have a choice, Ada quipped. You lot are a walking invitation for trouble. As the misfortune hummed into motion, Riggs allowed himself a moment of hope, a dangerous thing, given their track record. But the promise of a potential payday was a siren's call, and Riggs had never been particularly good at resisting temptation. The stars streaked by as the misfortune cut through space, its course set. Riggs leaned back, watching the familiar pattern of light and darkness play across the cockpit. It was moments like these that almost made him forget the constant danger they were in, almost. Jax leaned over, voice low. You think this goose is carrying something valuable? Let's hope so, Riggs replied. Or we'll be the ones cooked. Their approach was uneventful, which was a small miracle in itself. No enforcement ships, no sudden anomalies, just the endless expanse of space and the distant glint of their target. There she is, Mara said, nodding toward the view screen. The Golden Goose drifted in their path, a hulking mass against the stars. Looks ripe for the picking, Jax said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. Or a trap waiting to spring, Mara countered, ever the pessimist. But Riggs found comfort in her skepticism. It was better than blind optimism, which had a tendency to get people killed. All right, let's do this by the book, Riggs instructed. Ada, anything on their comms, radio silence, Ada reported. Either they don't want to be found or they're as clueless as a rock in a black hole. Let's hope it's the latter, Riggs said. Mara, get us close enough to latch on. Jax, prepare for a little creative boarding. The misfortune glided toward the freighter, quiet and unassuming. Riggs felt the familiar stir of adrenaline, part excitement, part fear, coursing through him. This was the part he lived for, the part that made all the near-death experiences worth it. As they latched onto the freighter, Riggs and Jax suited up, ready to breach the hull. The airlock cycled with a hiss and they stepped into the void, tethered to the misfortune like umbilical cords to their mother ship. Remind me again why we do this, Jax asked, voice crackling over the comm. Because we're too stupid to quit and too stubborn to die, Riggs replied, a grin tugging at his lips. I knew there was a reason, Jax said. They reached the freighter's airlock, and Jax got to work with a set of tools that looked suspiciously like they'd been borrowed from different ships. With a few deft movements, the hatch opened with a groan and they slipped inside. The interior was dimly lit, a maze of corridors and storage bays. Riggs felt the thrill of the unknown, the potential for discovery or disaster around every corner. Keep your eyes peeled, Riggs said, moving forward with caution. Ada, what's the layout look like? Cargo holds on the lower decks, Ada replied, her voice a comforting presence in their helmets. Bridge above. If they've got anything valuable, it's likely stowed away, got it. Jax, you take the cargo. I'll check the bridge, splitting up in a potentially hostile situation. "That's bold even for you," Jax said with a note of admiration. "Or stupid. Either way, let's make it quick." As they parted ways, Riggs moved through the corridors, his footsteps muffled by the eerie silence. The place felt abandoned, though he knew better than to trust appearances. He reached the bridge, surprised to find it empty save for a single chair tilted askew. "What do we have here?" Riggs murmured, moving to the console. He tapped a few keys, bringing up a manifest, a long list of mundane supplies and one entry marked classified. "Jackpot." "Jax, I've got something," Riggs said, sending the data to Jax's suit. "Get what you can and meet me back at the airlock." "On it," Jax replied. Riggs moved back through the ship, his mind racing with possibilities and pitfalls. Whatever was classified could be their ticket out of the red, or it could be the noose around their necks. But Riggs had never been one to shy away from a gamble. As he neared the airlock, Jax appeared, laden with a crate. "Found a few goodies. Should fetch a decent price on the black market." "Good," Riggs said. "Let's get out of here before they decide to come back and spoil our day." They hurried back to the Misfortune, their hearts pounding in unison with the thrumming engines. The airlock cycled shut and they were safely aboard, the freighter cast adrift behind them. "Nice haul," Mara said as they entered the cockpit, her eyes glinting with approval. "Hope it's worth it," Riggs said, sinking into his chair. "Ada, let's see if we can find a buyer." "Already on it," Ada replied. As the Misfortune slipped away into the void, Riggs allowed himself a small sigh of relief. They'd managed to pull off another job, and with any luck, it would keep them afloat for a little while longer. "Here's to surviving another day," Mara said, raising an imaginary glass. "To survival," Jax echoed, cracking open a can of who knew what. Riggs chuckled, though a part of him knew better than to let his guard down. In their line of work, survival was never guaranteed, and tomorrow promised another round of chaos and uncertainty. But for now, they had a moment, a fleeting, precious moment of victory. And sometimes that was enough. As the Misfortune cruised through space, Riggs was slouched in his chair, eyes tracing the familiar jagged lines of the cockpit's cracked windshield. A relic from some forgotten skirmish, it was a constant reminder of their precarious existence. Like an old scar, it told a story that nobody bothered to listen to anymore. Jax was sprawled across a seat, inspecting the crate they'd lifted from the Golden Goose. "I hope this isn't just filled with space diapers or something," Mara snorted. "Wouldn't that be our luck? A flying nursery supply store. Hey, maybe we could start a new business," Riggs said, barely suppressing a grin. "Riggs Diaper Delivery Service. Get your crap to you fast." Jax chuckled. "Catchy. Pretty sure it'd be less dangerous than our current gig. Less profitable, too," Mara pointed out, her fingers dancing over the controls, keeping the Misfortune on track. "We need to unload this loot somewhere we won't get shot at first. And where might that be?" Jax wondered aloud. "Our fan club seems to have chapters everywhere. We could try Dustball 7 again," Mara suggested, leaning back in her chair. "The place is as barren as a monk's love life, but it doesn't see much enforcement traffic." Back to the land of perpetual sandstorm," Riggs said. "Might as well. At least the locals aren't likely to ask too many questions. Except, why are you idiots back here?" Jax added, scratching his chin. "And probably can you leave?" Ada's voice crackled over the intercom. "It's settled then. Dustball 7, where dreams go to die and so do your hopes of a decent bath." "Thanks for the pick-me-up, Ada," Riggs said, sarcasm dripping from every word. "Saw a motivational poster once, but you're better." Ada's reply was as dry as the planet they were heading towards. "I live to serve." "Course is set," Mara confirmed. "ETA to Dustball 7 is longer than you'd like but shorter than forever." Riggs nodded. "Sounds about right. Let's hope we can sell this stuff without catching a bullet or two." The Misfortune hummed along, the whirring of its engines a comforting noise, or at least one they all were used to. The space around them was quiet, a calm before the inevitable storm that life seemed determined to hurl their way. "So what do you reckon's in that classified crate?" Jax asked, gesturing to the cargo that had become the center of their universe. "Could be anything," Mara replied. Stolen tech, exotic booze, maybe even a Raxolonian fur flap. Riggs raised an eyebrow. Let's hope not. Those things are nastier than a lawyer with a hangover. Hey, if it's booze, that's a win in my book, Jax said. We could drink to our inevitable demise. Always an optimist, Jax, Mara said, shaking her head. Better than being a pessimist, Jax quipped. At least I die smiling. The banter was familiar, a rhythm that kept them all sane amidst the chaos. Riggs wondered, not for the first time, why it was that they risked their necks for such meager rewards. For the thrill, the danger, or simply because they were too stubborn to do anything else. As Dustball 7 loomed ever closer, Riggs' gut twisted with the anticipation of what awaited them. The planet wasn't exactly a resort, and the locals had a reputation for being as welcoming as a cactus to a bare foot. But needs must when the devil drives, and desperate times called for desperate landings. The misfortune cut through the thin atmosphere like a knife through butter, or more accurately, like a spoon through hardened sludge. The ship's descent was rocky, the turbulence a reminder that space travel was less about elegance and more about survival. Welcome back to Dustball 7, Ada announced as they touched down with a jarring thud. Please watch your step as you disembark. The ground may be hot and your death imminent, Riggs sighed, unbuckling his harness. Ada, you should really consider a career in tourism. I'll keep that in mind, Ada replied. Assuming we're still alive tomorrow, Mara powered down the engines, the ship groaning in relief at the temporary reprieve. Let's see if we can find a buyer and not get shot in the process, she said, standing and stretching. We could use some credits and some luck. Luck's never been our strong suit, Jax said, hoisting the crate over his shoulder. But maybe today's the day the universe decides to cut us some slack. Here's hoping, Riggs muttered, though he wasn't holding his breath. The universe rarely played nice, especially to those who had long since fallen out of its good graces. The crew made their way down the gangplank, the heat of Dustball 7 hitting them like a slap in the face. The air shimmered with heat waves, and the landscape was a dull, never-ending sea of sand and rock. If there was a hell, Riggs figured this was its waiting room. Mara shielded her eyes from the harsh glare of the sun, squinting at the distant settlement, a cluster of shacks and domes that looked like they'd seen better centuries. Let's try Old Man Thorn, she suggested. He's always in the market for shady goods. Thorn, huh? Riggs said. I didn't think he'd still be around. Figured he'd have keeled over by now. He's like a cockroach, Mara said. Don't know what keeps him alive, but whatever it is must be potent. Great, can't wait to see his smiling face, Jack said sarcastically as they trudged toward the settlement. Let's hope he's in a generous mood. The walk was long, the heat oppressive, and the atmosphere charged with the familiar tension of impending trouble. Riggs scanned the horizon, half expecting to see a cloud of dust heralding an enforcement ship or some other unwelcome visitor. But for now, the world was quiet, save for the crunch of their boots on the gritty ground and the occasional cough of a dust storm on the horizon. The settlement was as unwelcoming as ever, its residents eyeing the newcomers with a mix of suspicion and indifference. Dustball 7 was a place where people minded their own business, mostly because getting involved in someone else's was a good way to end up in a shallow grave. Thorn's place was a ramshackle structure, cobbled together from scrap metal and sheer stubbornness. Riggs pushed open the door, the hinges creaking in protest as if resenting the intrusion. Inside, the air was marginally cooler, though it still carried the unmistakable scent of dust and desperation. Thorn was seated behind a makeshift counter, a grizzled old man with a face that looked like it had been left out in the sun too long. Riggs, Thorn greeted, his voice like gravel being ground underfoot. Didn't think I'd see you again. Figured you'd finally pissed off the wrong people, not for lack of trying, Riggs replied, nodding to the crate. Got something you might be interested in. Straight from a freighter that won't miss it. Thorn eyed the crate with a mix of greed and caution. What's inside? Your guess is as good as mine, Riggs said, but it's marked classified. Could be something valuable, Thorn grunted, motioning for Jax to set the crate down. Let's have a look then. The old man pried open the crate, revealing its contents to the curious eyes of Riggs, Mara, and Jax. Inside was a collection of unmarked black canisters, their purpose as enigmatic as the crate they'd been in. "What the hell are these?" Thorn asked, poking one with a gnarled finger. "Think of them as a mystery gift," Mara said. "The kind that could blow up in your face or make you rich, or both," Jax added helpfully. Thorn considered the canisters, his eyes calculating their worth or potential danger. "I'll give you 5,000 for the crate," he said finally. 5,000. Riggs echoed, incredulous. "We risked our necks for this." "Fine, 10,000, Thorn grumbled. "But that's my final offer." "You want more? Try your luck with someone else." Riggs exchanged a glance with Mara and Jax. It wasn't a great price, but out here beggars couldn't be choosers. "Deal," he said grudgingly. "Pleasure doing business with you," Thorn said, sliding a data chit across the counter. "Yeah, I'm sure it was the highlight of your month," Riggs said, pocketing the chit. As they left Thorn's establishment, Riggs couldn't shake the feeling that they'd just sold something invaluable for pennies. But then, wasn't that the story of their lives? Trading one set of problems for another, always hoping the next deal would be the one that changed everything. The misfortune awaited them, a steadfast companion in their journey through the stars. Riggs paused at the foot of the gangplank, taking in the view of Dustball 7 with its endless horizon of dust and sky. "Back to the grind?" Jax asked, looking equally weary and relieved. "Back to the grind," Riggs agreed, though his heart wasn't quite in it. The lure of the next job was already pulling at him, the unending cycle of risk and reward that defined their existence. As they boarded the ship, the airlock sealing behind them with a reassuring thud, Riggs wondered what lay ahead. More danger, more chaos, more of the same. But maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something different. "Where to next, Captain?" Mara asked, settling into her seat with practiced ease. "Not sure yet," Riggs admitted. "But I'm open to suggestions. Anywhere but here," Jax said. "This place gives me the creeps." "Dustball 7 does have a certain charm," Mara said dryly. "The kind that makes you want to leave as soon as possible." Ada's voice echoed through the cockpit, full of its usual sass. "Course set for anywhere but here. Buckle up, because life's a bumpy ride." With a final glance at the dusty planet below, Riggs took a deep breath and settled into his chair. The future was uncertain, filled with more questions than answers. But for now, they had each other, a ship that mostly worked, and the promise of another day. And in the grand scheme of things, that was worth more than any crate of mysterious canisters. The misfortune was a carnival ride in the sky, a rust bucket with a cracked windshield and an attitude problem. As they breached the atmosphere of Dustball 7, the ship's creaks and groans were as familiar as a bar song you couldn't get out of your head. Mara's fingers danced over the controls, coaxing the vessel through the turbulent descent like a seasoned rodeo rider. Dustball 7 didn't exactly roll out the welcome mat with its gritty charm and sandstorms that seemed to be on a never-ending quest to peel off your skin. Riggs leaned back in his chair, trying to look casual despite the fact that every bone in his body was bracing for impact. "Another glorious day in paradise," he muttered. "Ah, Dustball 7, Jax quipped, leaning into his seatbelt with the resigned air of a man who knew his life was just a series of bad decisions. "Smells like victory, or maybe that's just the ship burning." Ada's voice crackled over the intercom, dry as ever. "Reminder, the misfortune is not equipped with marshmallow roasting facilities. Please keep all limbs inside the vehicle until we're firmly on the ground, or whatever passes for ground here. Thanks, Ada." "You're a real gem," Riggs replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "Ever thought of moonlighting as a motivational speaker?" "I'd rather eject myself into the nearest black hole," Ada retorted. The landing was as smooth as a shot of cheap whiskey. They hit the ground with a jolt that would have unhinged lesser ships or lesser crews. But the misfortune held together, a testament to stubborn engineering and the crew's collective will to survive another day. Once the dust settled, Riggs unbuckled himself with a grunt, casting a glance towards the sprawling wasteland of Dustball 7. Right. Let's see if Thorn's still kicking and not serving as worm food. Mara gave a sardonic smile. You mean, go see if the old coot's still breathing so we can unload our mystery box of despair exactly. Riggs nodded, rubbing his neck. The misfortune might have landed, but the real turbulence was just beginning. They exited the ship, the heat hitting them like a slap across the face. Dustball 7 didn't do gentle. It did abrasive, obnoxious, and downright hostile. The settlement ahead looked like it was held together by spit and spite, a monument to the durability of metal and sheer bloody-mindedness. Jax adjusted the crate on his shoulder, the mystery cargo still sealed and silent. If this thing turns out to be something deadly, remind me to haunt you all. Only if you promise to do the dishes. Mara shot back, leading the way. As they approached Thorn's shack, a ramshackle hut that looked like it was one strong gust of wind away from becoming a permanent fixture of the desert, Riggs felt the familiar prickle of unease. Dustball 7 might have been a backwater, but it was a backwater with eyes everywhere. Inside, Thorn looked up from behind his cluttered counter, his face a roadmap of wrinkles and bad life choices. Well, Riggs and company. Thought you might have finally met your maker. Not yet. He keeps screening our calls, Riggs replied, nodding toward the crate. Got something you might want to take a look at. Thorn eyed the crate, suspicion warring with greed in his rheumy eyes. And what, pray tell, have you brought to my humble abode this time? Oh, the usual. Classified stuff from a freighter that was all too happy to part with it, Mara said with a shrug, her voice light. Or maybe they just didn't know we took it, Jax added, his grin wide. Details. Thorn rubbed a hand over his stubbly chin, considering. Since you're not dead yet, I suppose it's worth a look. Jax set the crate down and Thorn pried it open. The black canisters inside seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving off an air of unsettling mystery. What the hell are these? Thorn asked, poking at one of the canisters as if it might bite him. That's the million credits question, isn't it? Riggs remarked. Could be some kind of advanced tech, could be a trap, or maybe just someone's very expensive paperweights. Thorn grunted, the sound resigned. All right, let's say I'm interested. What's the going rate for mystery cans these days? 10,000, Riggs suggested, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. For the lot. Consider it a bargain for the potential risk involved. Thorn considered, then nodded slowly. Deal. But if these things explode, I'll expect a refund. Yeah, good luck with that, Mara interjected. We're not exactly subscribers to your return policy. Once the deal was done, they left Thorn's shack, Riggs pocketing the data chit with an uneasy sense of satisfaction. Another job done, another day survived. But the feeling wouldn't last. It never did. Back at the misfortune, the ship loomed like a silent sentinel, a testament to their collective stubbornness and refusal to give up. So, what now? Jax asked, leaning against the gangplank and looking out at the endless desert. We just keep running until we run out of space, pretty much, Riggs replied, glancing up at the sky. Unless the universe decides to throw us a bone for once. Highly unlikely, Mara said, shaking her head. The universe is like that one relative who shows up at family gatherings just to criticize everything and eat your food. Optimism, Mara. It's what gets us through the day, Riggs said dryly. Right up until it gets us killed, she shot back. Ada's voice crackled through the intercom again, cutting through the familiar banter. Captain, I suggest you buckle up. We've got a blip on the scanners. Something's headed our way and it's not coming over to borrow sugar. Riggs tensed, the fatigue of the day replaced by a fresh shot of adrenaline. Fantastic. Just what I needed, a reminder that life is a relentless series of unpleasant surprises. Good thing we didn't unpack, Jax said, pushing off the gangplank and heading inside. Looks like we're popular today. Let's just hope it's not enforcement, Mara added. I'm not in the mood for a shootout. Yeah, my dance card's full, Riggs agreed, following them up the gangplank. Inside, the misfortune hummed with readiness, as if sensing the imminent danger. Ada brought up the ship systems, displaying the incoming blip on a flickering holographic screen. Not an enforcement ship, Ada declared. Looks more like another freighter, but it's on a collision course with us. Lovely. Either someone's drunk at the wheel or they've got a grudge, Mara said, taking her seat and readying the controls. Let's not stick around to find out, Riggs decided, strapping in. Lift us off, Mara. Let's see if we can give them the slip. The Misfortune roared to life, engines straining as they lifted off the scorching surface of Dustball 7. The ground fell away beneath them, the settlement shrinking into a forgotten speck. They're gaining, Ada warned, her voice cutting through the rumble of the engines. Whatever they want, they are eager about it. Maybe they just want to borrow a cup of sugar, Jack suggested, though his fingers deftly flew over the controls, preparing the weapon system in case things got ugly. Or our head on a platter, Mara countered, eyes on the monitors. We'll find out soon enough, I suppose. The freighter loomed larger on the display, a hulking shadow that seemed to fill the screen. Whoever was at the helm wasn't interested in subtlety or survival for that matter. They're hailing us, Ada announced, a rare note of surprise in her voice. Want me to put them through? Why not? Riggs said, his tone resigned. Might as well hear what they have to say before we tell them where to stick it. The comm crackled to life, a voice dripping with smugness filling the cockpit. Well, if it isn't the crew of the Misfortune. Seems you've got something of mine. Sorry, you must be mistaken, Riggs replied, leaning back in his chair. We've got a strict policy against keeping other people's garbage. Don't play dumb, Riggs, the voice continued. Those canisters you sold to Thorn. They're mine and I want them back. Riggs glanced at Mara, who rolled her eyes. Looks like Thorn's got some explaining to do. Too bad for you, we don't have them anymore, Riggs said into the comm. Consider it a lost cause. Guess we'll just have to make sure you're not around to lose anything else, the voice retorted, the threat clear as day. Lovely, Mara muttered, her fingers dancing over the controls. Incoming fire, the Misfortune shuddered, alarms blaring as the other freighter opened fire. Riggs gritted his teeth, the familiar chaos of battle taking over. Evasive maneuvers. Riggs barked, adrenaline spiking. Jax, get those shields up, already on it. Jax called back, hands flying over the console. The ship veered sharply, dodging a burst of laser fire that painted the void with streaks of lethal light. Any bright ideas? Mara asked, her tone clipped but calm as she wove the ship through the assault. Just one, Riggs replied, grabbing the comm. Ada, how's our FTL looking? Faster than light or just faster than them? Ada quipped, her virtual presence a steadying force amidst the chaos. I'll take either at this point, Riggs said, his focus razor-sharp. FTL drives ready to go, Captain. Just give the word, Ada confirmed. Then let's get the hell out of here, Riggs ordered. Mara's hands were steady on the controls as she punched the coordinates, the space around them blurring into a kaleidoscope of stars as the Misfortune jumped into FTL. The freighter disappeared behind them, its threats swallowed by the void. With a collective exhale, they settled back into their seats, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away. Another flawless escape, Jax remarked, shaking his head. We should start charging admission for this thrill ride. Think we'll ever have a normal day? Mara asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Not likely, Riggs replied, relaxing back into his chair. But who needs normal when we've got each other? Ada's voice cut through the lull, tinged with amusement. And on that note, what's our next destination, Captain? Riggs considered, the universe spread out before them in all its chaotic, unpredictable glory. Wherever there's trouble, I suppose. Great. Should be easy enough to find, Mara said with a wry smile. And with that, the Misfortune sailed onward, a lone ship in the vastness of space, its crew ready for whatever came next.